that's how most of the other part of the world looks at Bangalore. Just to get you a bit of information about Bangalore, which does not need introduction, but the last 20 years in Bangalore have been very interesting. 20 years have been so chaotic that Bangalore looks like a constant construction site. There's perpetual construction happening. From what I hear, I believe in 2000, in another 10 years, a lot of people are going to evacuate from Bangalore, will be evacuated from Bangalore because there's not going to be enough water to support the city. Bangalore pumps water from 100 kilometers away from the Kaveri River. As you know, Bangalore is on a high plateau. Water has to be pumped. So the amount of electricity spent on water being pumped 100 kilometers uphill is very, very expensive. But still, we need that water because Bangalore had a lot of lakes, and these lakes were connected to each other. Unfortunately, because of the rampant development, we see all these lakes being occupied by greedy real estate agents, politicians, sports stadiums, etc., and have clogged all these interconnections with the lakes and have made what Bangalore is today a very, very messy place. But as you look back very romantically, and I think Bangaloreans are great people for nostalgia. You tell them something about Bangalore, it's always in the past, not in the present, because the present is too difficult to deal with. So when we talk about Bangalore, we always talk about what happened 20 years ago and how you had to wear monkey caps and mufflers, and it was chilly, and now somebody asked me whether it's raining in Bangalore at 3:30 in May and stuff like that. So, but all this is also because of the change in society and the way people live, and how art and culture makes its way into people's lives. So the story of Bangalore is also the story of India in certain ways. As we look back in retrospect, we realize that Bangalore was envisioned as one of the most modern cities in India. And it was Nehru who envisioned this kind of role, saying that Bangalore will be the mind of India. As you know, in 1908, the Indian Institute of Science was set up by the Tatars in association with the Maharaja of Mysore, donated 300 acres of land in the heart of the city. And as you enter Indian Institute of Science, the temperature dips because it's dense, it's full of trees, and this is how Bangalore was. And just to tell you that there was a conscious effort by the Mysore kingdom to make Bangalore and Mysore a model state. It was the visionary of the king of Mysore, who was Krishna Rajendra Odayar, a very important king, and incidentally Gandhi called him the Raj Rishi because he was the most generous and most pious king of that particular time. And it was Krishna Rajendra Odayar who had invited two very important people to design Bangalore. One of them is called Otto Koenigsberger, who is an architect. The other one is Gustav Hermann Krumbigel, who is a landscapist and a horticulturist, who is largely responsible for the kind of diversity of trees in Bangalore. And Koenigsberger is one of the persons who kind of invented this whole idea of tropical modernism or tropical architecture, which is suited for this particular region. Just to tell you that there was this vision, and that vision is no longer there. I think the industry has taken over Bangalore. It was the public sector earlier in the 60s and 70s, but later on it was the big boom, and the big boom came through IT industries. And as you know, that they say that the world is flat now. And Bangalore has become the back office of the world today, and most of my friends are called cyber coolies because they work in the night and are sleeping by day. And there's very little culture for them. The only culture is going to a mall, watching a movie or shopping or something like that. So this is where I locate a place like Shanthiroad. It is in a very middle class locality. It is a very small site, maybe 40 by 50 in dimensions, in feet. And it is conceived in an interesting way, which I'll come to later on. The portion below is the ground floor is where my family stays. So just to complicate things, it is something that the family has given to the city, or the family has given to me, and in return there was this gesture that we have to do something for the city and possibly for arts and culture. So the portion on top, the yellow portion, and the rest is just built, and this is the interior of the space. It's a little complicated. It's not like a regular flat because it's got an inner courtyard, and it's very ideal for projects and programs, for viewing things, for installations, even for projections, etc. And the image on the right is one of the studios built. So the inner courtyard has many open spaces. It is it's got voids and also solids in a way that it complements each other. Very, very modernistic in view, but also coming from the whole tradition that South Indian homes had a courtyard as a center of its existence, and we lived with the elements. So rain, wind, and the sun was part of our lives. This is what I was talking about. One of the major projects that we are involved in is archiving the city, and the tensions of or the leitmotifs of the city, which is change and conflict, which is what we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So the city in transit is a very important subject for us. So we have a large archive of photographs, of documents, of books, etc. that documents the city in its many phases. It's also a very personal project for me because the people, the couple on your right there are my grandparents, and they were farmers from the heart of the city. So I come from a farmer's family, and when I always look back, I realize that there was this kind of a connection to the city which I did not know much of, but came about during the research of this particular project. One of the projects we also did was a marathon drawing project. So this is a marathon drawing project is you come at 9 in the morning, you have your breakfast, lunch, tea, dinner, you keep drawing for 12 hours. And there will be 20 people or more, each one with many different kinds of papers, sitting and just drawing on one Sunday. It's difficult because, but at the same time you could chat, you could have a smoke, you could go and drink coffee, you could not do anything and watch somebody else draw, sharpen somebody's pencil or do whatever. So the whole idea is that you untune yourself, you sit in the gallery and draw. This is another pet project. It's called Nature Culture Walk. It's a walk that I take people. It's a voluntary walk. So it's announced in the papers and everybody comes for this walk, and it's to look at nature and culture in a context of the city. So this location is Lal Bagh, which is the closest one could get to a 300-acre garden, which is next to Shanthiroad, and one could get there and be in paradise. And this is a very, very important park, and it also gives Bangalore its identity because it's got a very, very dense concentration of different species of trees, plants, and also birds, which are fast disappearing. But this public walk makes people aware of nature, and it's not only led by me. We have a bird watcher, we also have a botanist, we also have somebody who is an archivist who accompanies us, and we connect the fort area, which is called Kote, and Pete, that is Peta, the town, Tota, that is garden, and Kere, that is lake. So it's called the Tota Pete Kere walk. So this gives it a kind of a link to the city's past and its fragile presence. An important project that kind of put Shanthiroad on the map, NRTT, is devised by Ratan Tata Trust. Many of you know it because it's in Mumbai, one of the well-recognized trusts which support the arts. And this grant, which came via Khoj, which is an alternative art space in Delhi, allowed us to network with Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal for almost 2 years. So we invited artists to come over, stay there for a month, work with another artist, create a body of work, and also make these long-term friendships and move on. So this is Prabhavati. I think Prabha is in the front there. Just to add, and that is Sureka and Anil, both of them well-known artists and art historian. This is Riaz. Prabha has been selected to represent India in the Venice Biennale, the next Venice Biennale. This is Prabha working. She's again has a reference of the debris of the city. So she's using the debris of around her own home, which is in the heart of the city, near the city market, and she's trying to incise certain patterns on these on the debris. The word Somberi Kate, those of you who know Kannada will understand it. Somberi means idler's platform, Adda. So another name for a part of Shanthiroad would be people who just come there with no great intentions. You might have chai, you might just hang around, you might meet a couple of artists, and possibly you might get married, or many other things also happen. So I'm just trying to tell you that this is a meeting place. Very important, it's a very, very significant social space. So Somberi Kate is the name given by Pushpamala, who used to have these talks in her home, which was slightly away from the center, and these talks shifted to One Shanthiroad. And these were called Relook Lectures on Indian Art. It became very popular, so many organizations invited the same speakers in Mumbai, Delhi, etc. This is Ram Rahman, who was also here for a talk, talking about Sunil Jana, a very important photographer. That's Ram. There was also lectures by important people like Panikkar. This is how the seating is. We don't put many chairs, so people just sit on mats, and the people who have bad backs sit on plastic chairs which are stackable. A few recognizable faces for some. A very interesting project with association with the Goethe Institute, where we work with one artist who comes from Germany, stays there for 2 months, and one of the conditions for the artist that he or she has to interact with the local community. So Beata did a workshop of sound art with the local college, Karnataka Chitrakala Parishad, which I worked with. And she'd invited a lot of artists to do small sound pieces. It was also a way to connect artists to other art institutions, also to enrich art education in the city. Another project called Street Scholars. This is Lata Mani, a very important historian, and she's also a very important writer in Bangalore. And she gave a series of talks to an open house. It could be something artistic, political, or something as academic as postmodernism or feminism. Lot of students, lot of young people, curious, first-time visitors. a few, Arshia is here, Sharmila. You also have Sunita Kumar from Galleries Key. This is an invitation for the Coach project. So it was very fascinating for us to invite a Pakistani artist, which is very exotic in the south. And when Imran came and he was wearing his black Patan suit and walking on the streets, he said, "Nobody's looking at me." I said, "You look like one of us." So it's very interesting that these things happen, and in this process we really become friends. And somebody like Imran, who's never been to the southern part of India, it's a real shock for somebody like that another India exists beyond the North India. And this is a collaborative work. So it's like a collaborative work is like an arranged marriage that is made to work. So you're forced to do a small project where you have to work together. Sometimes it's very, very difficult. Both of them don't speak to each other. Both of them in different setups and egos and hassles, and I won't work with this person and I'll do my own thing, and you can put it together if you like. So you have to deal with a lot of things. It's not always a happy ending. So when Imran and Bartesh decided to work together, it was a very symbiotic relationship. So it was an idea which both of them had. They had, they were shot, there's a short video where there's a video of this housefly that moves from one body to another. So as it moves, it touches a part of the body and there's a red spot. So, and as it touches a body, the person twitches. So the twitch is done before the animation of the housefly. So you have this very interesting imaginary map that is drawn between both of them. You don't know whether one is Hindu or the other one is Muslim, or the one is Pakistani, the other one is South Indian, whatever. But there are these two bodies and there's this transaction that happens. And the same project in a video project shot, and the artist wanted a pink room. So it's easier to buy pink cloth than paint the room pink. So this was one of the ideas. Imran's work again, and Imran did something very effective, and very clever. He made a seal of the housefly in black, and he stamped it all over the gallery, and that's his portrait. So the houseflies are just coming out of his body, going outside into those small ventilation and out into the exterior of the space. This is a portrait of Imran and Bhartesh standing next to each other. And there's small jets that are intersecting each other. This is what happens when boys get together. So they work all night, so there are no restrictions. And this is another project which is fascinating for its material. The material looks like a dragon. It's actually gloves which are used by workers who work in a steel factory. And these gloves were collected from the city market, hundreds of them, and they were stringed together to create this idea of a large animal, which was also worn by the artists for a performance. The idea was to try and look at how we look at people from Nepal. And it's only the labor that is visible to us. Most of them are Bahadurs, and all of them are called Bahadurs, unfortunately. And most of them are either housekeepers or watchmen in the city of Bangalore too. So this is idea to relate to the Nepalis in the city. And to our good fortune, our neighbor was a very friendly, nice guy who the artist befriended. His name was Bharat, strangely. And they had a great friendship together, speaking in Nepali, and there was a lot of conversations happening. The other artists who collaborated, this was called A Nightmare. So if you look at the material, it's always a challenge that artists are moving beyond sculpture, formal sculpture, pedestal sculpture and painting. Artists are pushed to innovate, so there's always this charving that has to happen, saying that experiment, it's okay if it fails, you know, like the process is important than the product. Something very simple as your hanger becomes a cloud. Strangely, we, most of us, most people ask us, how do we manage? What is our funding structure? I'll get to that later, but what is interesting is there's sometimes organizations which are big as Bosch, which want to do something for culture, and they have something called a CSR policy, which if you know how to tap, because it generally goes to, you know, like victims of floods and cyclones, etc. But if you know how to tap it, I think it's a very interesting funding system from companies that can support culture. So Bosch has a good presence in Bangalore, and somehow we didn't make this connection. One of the directors of the Goethe Institute asked the Bosch manager to give 5 organizations small grants, and she called it peanut money because it was just $1 lakh each, and we could support 4 artists in this process. So Usha and Vanita were invited, both of them very young students working with origami, and this is what they created. And the reference was a story by Girish Karnad, which says a girl who became a flowering tree. It's a local folk tale. This is an installation done by Harish, who lives a young artist again. Focuses on young artists who just come out of college. So this is the living area, and the artist has taken it over and has created this installation. There's also, these are the remains of an woodcut workshop. That's the work, the actual work. So these are the few strange things that happen in Shanthiroad. Nothing religious, but Shabnam, who is a very good friend, said that she wants to use it for a Kabir satsang. And I said, perfectly fine. And so it's just advertised on email, and a group of people from different parts of the city come to Shanthiroad around 8 o'clock, and a satsang happens for 2 hours. And there's also, what do you say, a kind of discourse that Shabnam does, because she translates Kabir's songs into English and makes it more meaningful to people who just sing the song, and also trying to understand the philosophy of Kabir. The woman in the blue sari who's sitting on a chair is actually a folk singer who comes every month only once to Shanthiroad, and she just sings songs, that's it. And the day Shabnam was having a satsang, I invited her, and they were jamming together after 10 minutes. So this is the gallery space. And incidentally, the show that you see there looks very amateur, etc. It is a show of people who work behind the scene in other galleries. So one of them who works in the Goethe Institute was called Prabhakar, who's been working there for 20 years. He's done these sculptures out of spare parts he's collected. The photographs you see in the background is a kind of gallery help in another alternative space called Samuha, and there's also other artists. This is one of the openings. No wine and cheese. It's always a concoction of fruit punch and lots of rum. Another connection is with Australia. So the Asia Link project brings artists together. Janet and Jennifer are a couple who came here, and they did something very fascinating. they realized that both of them work in a feminist perspective. So they made saris which have camouflage prints on it. And there was a performance where they made one of the artists wear this camouflage sari and walk in the streets of Bangalore. And you know what happens. Here is an artist who actually lives in Bangalore but is always stayed abroad. And she did a take on this idea of every time she said that she was Indian in the US of A, people thought she's Native American. So this was a play with the identities, and Anu is somebody who's a professor in the Rhode Island School of Art, and she's a Bangalorean, and she keeps coming every year, and every time she comes we somehow catch her and make her do a small project or a slideshow, etc. Many of you might have heard of this very famous school called Shrishti School of Art and Design. So Shrishti's faculty are very close to me, so every time they want to have an open house exhibition, they use Shanthiroad, and some of their products have to do with local crafts like the Channapatna toys, etc. This is a toy making workshop which we had. It's another project to make young children love plants. There's a magazine called Take on Art. So one of the launches of Take on Art was there in Bangalore, and the editor of Take on Art, Bhavna Kakkar, wanted to have something unique, and the uniqueness was trying to get Kiran Subbaya, who's a very elusive artist and who never speaks to anybody, come there and speak to all of us. It was a full house. There's about 100 of them sitting in this courtyard. Sometimes we have some special people who pass by, like Anand Patwardhan, who's sitting in the foreground. There's Girish Karnad and his wife who come quite regularly. And many of these art students, artists. This is a project which is close to my heart because I always want to work outside the gallery. And it's a challenge when you want to do something called the idea of social sculpture. How do you go out in the open and interact with the public? How do you convince people that it's to plant trees? So we did something called the Tree Festival, and the Tree Festival was conceived in a way that artists create posters of trees and they'll be exhibited in public spaces. Then we found a empty, I mean it was not empty, it was a dump yard, you know, like where construction debris is just dumped, and after a while this place is auctioned off by the municipal council, and somebody buys it and builds something. So we identified one of these places, and there were houses all around this. So we went and convinced 50 houses, 50 families, saying that plant one tree in the name of your child and promise to take care of it because it is also your child. So adopt a tree. So we are not going to be, I'm not going to be involved in watering the tree every day. I'm also not going to be involved in making sure that the stray cow doesn't come and eat it up. So you are responsible for that tree. And if you want the space to be green, you want birds, you want some kind of greenery, a patch in your city, it's your responsibility. So this is a game we played with them, and it worked very well because we planted 200 trees. 150 of them survived after the first monsoon. The woman in the center is a very important person. She is the local corporator. So we went and invited her. She did nothing. She just stood there and pretended to plant a tree. We wanted her quote unquote blessings, which made sure that there was, you know, like this land is there and it's not going to be taken away by the municipal council. So she proudly came there for a photo opportunity and she disappeared after 5 minutes. We had to do this. And we work very closely with the local politicians. We invite them and garland them and give them a box of sweets so we can occupy public space. And we don't have to bribe them, like we make it public. So we don't have to go to their offices and beg them. Another of these outreach programs, we're very interested in outreach programs, local municipal schools, small areas where art doesn't penetrate. So the idea of that art with a capital A is always going to stay in galleries and museums. So here is an opportunity where we told a local school, it was called Padmavati Montessori School. There was nothing Montessori about it, but this Montessori has become a label. So we went there and told them that this is not a drawing competition, which is what everybody does, Rotary Club, Lions Club, etc. We want kids to paint, and everybody is going to get prizes. So we told them the project was called Pause. Draw a map between your home and your school and illustrate all the places you want to pause. So it could be the temple, it could be the bakery, it could be Hotel Pallavi, some imaginary swimming pools which didn't exist, and sometimes trees with fruits, like I don't know where they are, but the kids noticed them. So they drew a map from home to school. Nobody got any prizes, everybody got sketch pens and chocolates and etc. There was no first prize or second prize. But what was important was all of them were invited to the gallery, and the works were exhibited outside the gallery space on the wall. So everybody had a feeling that this is their first one person show, like. This is part of the previous project, few of my collaborators. This is a work that talks about the shift of Bangalore, the construction site. I was talking about Bangalore is getting its new metro, so we have these huge pillars everywhere, and most of these iconic images you see on the pillars are a Photoshop done by one of the artists, and it was kind of put up in different parts of the city. Another one of the lectures by Ashish, it looked at Bombay and the representation of the city in the context of Sudhir Patwardhan's work. Bold from the Blue, we had announced this on Facebook, the tree festival, and there was Tamara, who we don't know, sent us this image. I still don't know who Tamara is. But we used this image, we printed it, we put it up. Another one of those windfalls. Obviously, I cannot afford to have Miss CCB coming to One Shanthiroad. She's the curator of the 12th Documenta that just happened. So happened our friends in Bombay, Sharmila Sawant and others said that you have to go to Mumbai to Carolyn, and Carolyn said yes, and Shanthiroad is generally open for these last minute programs. And Madam had a full house, and she was very important. Every artist wanted to socialize with her because that was their only opportunity to get to the Documenta. And people who generally don't come and who think Shanthiroad does not need our attention or does not need a visit, we're all there, at least to see Carolyn. This is an installation. Agam and Puram are two Tamil words, and it means inside, outside, interior, exterior. So this is a work by an artist. Referring to the violence in Sri Lanka. The space in the gallery being used for a puppet show. The poster for the tree festival done by a designer friend. I'll just stop here and show you something else. In the meantime, any questions? Or should we have it in the end? Okay.
the basic paradox. It's active and it's inactive. It's quiet, yet it is crowded. It's the physical Facebook. So when Facebook dies, there'll still be one Shanthiroad.
24 hours and 7 days a week, you get food anytime you park into this kitchen. That's only at one Shanthiroad.
I just have a small passage to read. It's actually from an architect called Vatsala Dakuna who lives and works in Bangalore, and she was invited by an architecture magazine called Domus during their launch issue to write about different architectural spaces, and strangely One Shanthiroad was one of the projects. And this is what Vatsala wrote, and it was very perceptive to have somebody else's view about Shanthiroad than me saying what Shanthiroad is. So Vatsala says, before modernity, colonization and the advent of democracy, many Indian practices were community-based. This included art, before it was split from utilitarian craft and architecture. There was always a deep connection with the elemental, and practices worked with these connections within a larger fabric. At the very outset, the idea of One Shanthiroad deals with positioning the individual within the larger collective by asking its multiple residents and visitors what is home and what is art. From there, it goes on to explore idea of ownership of a home as well as art itself. Simultaneously, it visits the dynamics of what makes a family and what constitutes an art community. It also questions whether there can really be separate entities, or could one not be part of the other, socially and architecturally. One Shanthiroad, in a rather subconscious way, sets out on a journey where it revisits, questions and blurs some of these boundaries that divide India, the culture, and India, the nation. In the process, it also reveals the open-endedness of architecture as a discipline, free from ancient treatises as well as modern-day obsessive form making. The project demonstrates its readiness to reconnect and redefine its relationship and responsibility to the site, the social structure, the client, and history. Here, the client, as an alternative facilitator, has shaped the program. His choice of being close to the family and use family property despite its size, location within the city. Within the context of positioning and the questions that home, studio, gallery are, and what constitutes art, the client sets out the programmatic terrain of its architecture. These queries highlight numerous ways in which art is lived, learnt, shared, conducted, experienced, and understood. At the same time, assert the conditions of fluidity, ambiguity, and flexibility as underlying structure for architectural exercise. These questions have both shaped and modified the design parameters, enabling the architecture to stay somewhat open-ended. Simultaneously, it questions architecture's outcome of rigid, predetermined programs and brings in focus the need for spaces that are adaptive and inclusive. While exploring if and where the edge between private and public ends, between private and the public needs blurring rather than reinforcing. Although the design of One Shanthiroad appears to be about a play of solids and voids using alternative enclosed and open to sky spaces, it is essentially about movement. The positioning and sequencing of various doorways and stairs allow the multiple trajectories of people, ideas, and activities to intertwine and intersect. The scale of architectural spaces ensure chance encounters that result in collaborations as well as conflicts, enriching both art and architecture. The volumetric strategy is hinged on these moments and interactions, and from home, studio, gallery, space to shared communal areas, the architecture reflects an adaptive interlock between form and program. This house rejects the notion of home as merely a private, secluded shelter, as a place to escape, designed for an insular, static family unit. Instead, it extends the idea of family, reconnecting the individual within the community, not limited to a biological one, but that where hierarchies are replaced by open-ended interactions. By doing so, it chooses to and becomes a part of crisscrossing streams, cultural, social, political, linguistic, culinary, etc. Architecture which inhabits the confluence of such flows also becomes a channel to further moment and synthesis. It displaces the notion of an artist studio as a distant loft walled in solitude. Here the studio is a cafe. It is also an open house where all are welcome. The lessons and the inspirations are through simultaneous narratives that flows through the architectural space. It is not really a space for pause, despite its limited size. It is a dynamic space for wandering, action, stir, flux, and mobility. Ideas, encounters, experiments, endeavors, communities. One Shanthiroad is a generous and courageous idea. It attempts at expanding the scope of home from being merely a private enclosure and at freeing the art discourse from institutionalized learning. In this attempt, it frees the art gallery from its conventional impressions as the rarefied domain of the well-heeled and discerning patrons. This process re-establishes a symbiotic relationship between the art, the artist, and the environment. By locating itself in a new political and social order, it sustains the old bonds with histories of places and people. The architecture provides the three-dimensional frame through which multiplicities are lived, imagined, painted, woven, and narrated. Ghulam Ahmad Sheikh's phrase, simultaneous narratives in a single frame, best describes the spirit of One Shanthiroad. This is what Vatsala told in her essay about the space, and I think it captures the essence of the space, which is in constant flux. I forgot to mention my dear collaborator and friend, the architect Meeta Jain, who is a brilliant architect and somebody who I encountered in the very beginning of conceiving of the space. We both put our heads together to conceive this place. It was, she thinks that I am the best client an architect can have, and she's not a very, she's not everybody's architect, because she's very stubborn and doesn't listen to anybody. So every time I introduced her to friends, they ran away from her. So sometimes things really work, and the best example for this kind of a collaboration where an architect and a client can work together is the proof of this particular place. Because the way the space is built, it's in constant flux. And although I also live in this space, so an artist who lives there has to live with me too. So we have something like an open afternoon where everybody has lunch or tea in the evening. And as you might have seen, there was one project which we did was called Meals Ready. So the gallery was made into a restaurant. So the artist cooked for the audience. There was a fixed menu and it was very exotic, and we made it. And there was a challenge on the last day, the third or fourth day, where all of them were, it was free, almost free. So all of them had to bring anything which we don't know about in a bag and give it to us, and we'll cook it for them. So it was, see, cooking is never done in a gallery. And once you start cooking, it's a different dynamic. And food is one important thing that brings a lot of people together. And especially in the Indian context where you have these langars and satsangs and people feeding each other constantly, prasad, the idea of prasad, and sharing, and the conversation that happens. It's not the food, it's not even the quantity. It's this whole idea of sharing, social space, chatting, and like just and not having been pressured to buy something. We very rarely sell works of art in Shanthiroad. Strangely, some artists have sold works, and we are always very happy when they sell work. We have a clause because it runs under a not-for-profit trust. We do not take a commission. We either take a work of art from the artist, or we ask them to give us a handling charge, which is never done, of 10%, and just to cover costs. And we have any other questions about, the financial situation, the way it runs, the people behind it, I'm happy to share with you.
Sorry, I think I have seen, and it's a very different space in Bangalore, which I had never.
So you should come.
So what I am just trying to understand is that can you not give different cities, since you are doing so many other things?
I do this rarely. This is what I want to do. Very difficult to run Shanthiroad in Bangalore.
No. You should give the ideas to the others in various cities who are doing these kind of different, what should I say, projects.
Alternative spaces. People come to me, and I'm very happy to share how Shanthiroad works. Recently in Hyderabad, there was a group of people who came and said that they wanted to run this on the model of Shanthiroad. I told them what works and what doesn't work. Better to know what doesn't work. What doesn't work is that we don't have a corpus amount to keep it going for a very long time. We can shut it anytime. And what also doesn't work is that to have this, whenever you go into an arts administration course, which I happen to go to, which is an ATSA program run by Coach, they started telling us, they called me and said, okay, now give us your vision plan. I know I have a vision, but my vision can't be, like put into words. I can't say in the next 10 years, Shanthiroad is going to do this, this and this. When I don't know, after 3 months, Shanthiroad will have the money to pay salaries to his part-time workers. So we have a staff, we have a part-time cook, we have 2 people who are helpers, we have a person who comes and works as doing documentation, a coordinator, etc. We hire people for the day on an hourly basis. We don't have permanent staff. And an important thing that I realized very early was to keep overheads low. That is the success of Shanthiroad, if it is a success. Because if you pay rent and if you pay a lot of salaries, your overheads for the month is very heavy. When we have to really stretch ourselves to keep this place going, because it's not a profit-making space. The most of the money comes from residency programs. So two of the studios are rented out to artists who come and stay there. So the money that comes from the residency program pays for the salaries, the upkeep, the bijli, pani, internet, everything, and there's no money left in the end of the month. So it's a very, very fragile kind of thing, and we do not, according to the policy of the trustees, we've not taken government funding. The government has not given us any funding because in Karnataka, that if you have a government, if you take government fund, the government sends a representative to be part of your trust. So there'll be this Sarkari clerk who come and sit and have his coffee and biscuit and tell you what to do. And which I don't want, none of us want, I think. So I don't want to isolate Shanthiroad. Shanthiroad is not a unique thing. What I want to also say that Bangalore is very special because Bangalore is the only place that has these kind of alternative places, and there are 4 of them and in very close proximity to each other. One is Jaga, the other one is Bar 1, Bangalore Artist Residency. The third one is called Rasa, but it just packed up just 4 months ago. 3 of us are somehow surviving, and we always are friends, and we try to do something on the same day. So like in Bombay, you have openings on the same day, so you can hop, skip and jump. This is what we do. And we also do gallery walks from one place to another and connect and keep a kind of a cultural atmosphere of the city. And all of them are like Shanthiroad. Each one might have different vision plans or different ways of funding, but all of them work in the alternative art sector.
Is your focus on emerging artists or?
Only emerging artists. We've never had an established artist show in Shanthiroad. Obviously, there are galleries, and also to mention that some of the emerging artists have shown first in Shanthiroad. So, and they've been picked up. There's a policy that we do not promote them after the show. We just, if anybody is interested, we obviously give their contacts, etc. But we do not like a gallery. So we give them a show. We sponsor material if and when there's funding available. And after that, if a gallery picks them up, we're very happy. And Talur had one of his first shows in Bangalore with One Shanthiroad, Sakshi Gupta, and many others. Abdul Haq, who you know of. So it's purely for emerging artists. Established artists do not need a Shanthiroad because they already have other very comfortable cushions to sit on.
The residency for how many months? Do you have any fixed number?
We don't have a fixed kind of time, but generally the shortest residencies have been for 15 days, and it drives us mad because people come with preconceived ideas that this is what I'm going to find in India, and the demands are very heavy because at the end of the day I'm supposed to take them and to these places which they imagine that they want to get information from. So the demands would be something like they want to film a stone quarry which is illegal, to having a long conversation with the cross-dresser Hijra, to other difficult things of trying to photograph the nightlife of the city, and also, there's one artist and she said, can I go out at 11 o'clock? I just told her that I'll come with you, I'll take you out. You know, like, so I'm responsible for these people. So it is a very, and recently there was a residency from Baroda sending me a note saying that can you give us your rules and regulations, what you can't do in a residency. So if somebody is smoking pot and the cops visit me, I have to shut shop. Yes.
Quite a few questions. I thought it was an extremely stimulating presentation.
Thank you.
First, how successful have you been in enthusing people in your city to get interested in what you're doing? I mean, over the years, how many more people visit and how many people of different types of backgrounds and intellectual persuasions come? Do you find the same sorts of people pursuing the same academic stroke cultural interests coming, or do you find people from other strata and professions also visiting? The other question is a broader one. Clearly, to anyone who contemplates this sort of activity, it becomes very evident that in artistic practice, there is the potential, and when I mean artistic practice, I mean it in a very broad sense. I think there is the potential to develop, I wouldn't call it a language, but the means of communication which can go very far, you know. Has there been any thinking about the need to develop a method of communicating across social strata, across geographies, about not just art, but about the real world and humankind in general? Thank you.
We are always concerned about the usual suspects, because the usual suspects come what may. So how do we bring, the challenge is how do we bring in new people to these spaces, and how do we tell them that there's something happening here? So we put our heads together and we did a project where we invited 5 studio potters to have a show of this utilitarian studio pottery from Pondicherry. And believe me, I've never seen so many people in Shanthiroad. There was, a queue of people coming who've never been to Shanthiroad, and they were buying something, because you could buy something for 100 rupees, or you could buy a dinner set, or you could buy something, a vase, but you could buy something which you could afford. Then we realized that the idea of bringing craft, we called it showcase at One Shanthiroad, using craft as a trigger to bring in people is a very interesting idea and concept, because craft relates to more people than contemporary art. And here it is studio potters who are doing some of the best kind of pottery in the country today. The other thing which I'd like to say, it's very difficult to have a utopian plan to bring in different people all the time. It's extremely difficult. Our target audience is the students, art lovers, and people who realize that they don't have to come and buy something, but it's an experience also to meet other interesting people, new people who come to the city, and people say, just go to Shanthiroad, you will get plugged into the network of the city. So it's like a fulcrum or a trigger. We just connect people. If somebody comes to the city and they want A, B, and C to be connected, we put them onto NGOs. We have a long list of people, musicians, contemporary dancers, architects, and we are like the yellow pages of Bangalore. We can connect you to anybody except the biggies. We can take you anywhere in the city, which is generally not accessible. So this is our, I think, a unique selling proposition or whatever. Where, like I'm there, and I have a group of friends who are volunteers and people who are very well connected, and if somebody says that I want somebody came and said that they wanted to photograph and film a well, a living well. It's very easy for us. Or somebody who wants to find out how jasmine flowers get transported to Bangalore and how roses, Dutch roses are exported from Bangalore on Valentine's Day to Europe, we'll do it for you. That's the only thing I can assure you. I can't assure you anything else, but we can plug you into any kind of system, any kind of information, anybody who's a specialist or an important person in Bangalore, they are in touch with us and we have direct access to them. And people come with very interesting problems. Somebody came with this fantastic idea, huge budget, of trying to look at Dutch connection in southern India. So I don't know this connection existed. The idea was a lot of granite tombstones are made in Bangalore and southern India. The granite is mined in Bangalore. Bangalore has a lot of quarries, and people do not, because most of the time it's illegal. There are these huge mountains that are slowly being demolished for granite, and we had to fix them up with somebody to film the whole process of illegal mining of granite, transportation from the blocks to a place in Coimbatore, the finishing of the stone, and how the agent comes to this stone factory and commissions the tombstones which are made in Coimbatore and shipped all the way to Amsterdam. So these are the things that happen, and we keep a record and address links of all these connections we have. It's a hands-on thing, it's very experimental, and we also encourage a lot of artists to come, and when artists say that we want to do a show, I persuade them not to do the show right away, but work towards a show. So in the process, they will meet other artists, collaborators, maybe experts who will give you different ideas, and work towards the show, and what they came with and what has happened during the show it's a total different story, and I think that's something very unique about this space. It's like a catalyst, it's a collaborative work. You meet a lot of interesting young people who will tell you that I'll get this done for you, and so you meet, otherwise you don't have access to them.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shanti. Firstly, I want to compliment you. You know, whatever I've seen is pretty incredible. That work you're doing. It reminded me of during the art summit, Firoza Godrej was talking about Simrosa and how they started, and they had the performances. They had musicians come in. So that was like somewhat like a deja vu when you showed this. We need more spaces like this. I hope you do manage to survive. Okay, having said that, I have a few questions. How do you go about selecting these artists? You have artists from Pakistan and from somewhere else, and is it you? Is it like in collaboration with some other people? How does it work? Also, when you said the funding, comes from the residency, so do artists pay for the time that they, spend at the residency? And thirdly, what do you do with the work? Because you function as an NGO and you ask them to leave one of their works, so what happens to that?
Shall I go backwards?
Sure.
There are a lot of works lying under beds and cots and in the attics, and we still still trying to do this fundraising, which we're never able to do. But every time we want to do a fundraising, people say the market is low. Don't have a fundraiser. So how do I select artists? Is that I network with other similar organizations in these countries through other alternative networks. So and 3 artists portfolios are sent to us, and we choose 1 artist. Many times we do not choose. Sometimes artists come to us. Regarding the paid residencies, most of these artists are paid by their cultural organizations. They don't pay from their pockets. They are charged a particular fee. And Indian artists are given the space free for 2 months or 3 months in a year as a scholarship to encourage them. And it's it's a way to support the upcoming artists. Then the other thing is that survival has been our success. We are 10 years old now, and it's very, as we realize, if you look at the trajectories in the Indian art scene, it is the artist-led initiative, the private initiatives of people that have been success stories. As you already know, and I don't need to elaborate, that spaces run by the government are what they are. So it is always the initiative of individuals, which is what the title says, an institutional critique. So what is an institution and how is it critiqued is obviously by trying to create another institution which is able to provide a space and a system that works. In my own career, I taught art history for 12 years in Karnataka Chitrakala Parishad, and I took voluntary retirement because I was terribly fed up by the system. The system is a monster and it's generally going to eat you up. So you need to jump from the sinking ship before you drown. The only way to do it was to create this small boat that could just float. So that's what happened to me. I realized that instead of critiquing a system, which all of us do very well because we are outsiders, sometimes we are insiders, I was in a situation where I could not do all these things in an art college because I had to take permissions, I had to do so much of paperwork, and it was terribly boring. Red tape and hierarchies are the bane of this country, and it's a system that we can never get rid of. And the art education system in our country is in shambles. And I was part of this system. So the only idea was to create an alternative space that could provide these kind of systems of non-hierarchical learning. So when somebody comes with a problem, there's somebody else who's younger than you who's going to sort out your problem. This doesn't happen in an art college. Peer learning doesn't happen in an art college. And exploration and experimentation beyond this big structure called syllabi, like you have to do oil on canvas, no experimentation, it's not part of your syllabus. They also say don't do work like Shanthiroad. So we become a norm, like. So it's again back to this whole story is that how do spaces like this network with the city, its own landscape, its people, its problems and situations, is through creating some kind of a project that connects us with the environment, with the other artists who are working in the city with different projects, to give them support in terms of people, material, etc. So when artists come to Shanthiroad, it is mandatory that they go out for walks with me. One is a walk which is going to introduce them to the city, the other one is a walk that is going to introduce them to the material they want to work with during the beginning of their residency, but the material and the concepts may change. Then you have other alternative ways of working, etc. So it's more of a hands-on kind of thing. So sometimes I might be helping somebody fix their work or hang the work or cooking a meal or doing something else.
So you're saying you also function as a mentor?
Kind of.
Because usually there aren't mentors, right? I mean,
we have a mentoring program where
okay.
when artists, young artists are there in the MA and they come to us, we don't give them instant shows. We tell them that show us your work, let's work towards a show. So we give them 6 months to a year to come up with a show. And the work, most of the time, is brilliant. Because they come back and they have to review, and every time they have a meeting with me, they have to type a small note of the minutes of the meeting of what happened to their work, what suggestions they got, and where are they taking that work to, like are there changes that have happened, etc. All of them are emerging in. And we also have a policy that every 5 boys you're going to support, 5 girls have to be supported. It's very gender structured.
And all the emerging artists are from art school, or like they have passed out from?
most of them are from art school. And another outreach project we did was, which I mentioned to the class in the morning, is to do artistic classes in Kannada and Tamil in the non-English speaking schools which do not have artistry teachers. So we went all over the countryside in Karnataka. Also thought of making it a larger all India thing, but I don't think I have the time to do it. But I have this kind of utopian intention. And it's not a one man's job. Believe me, I might be sitting in front of you and I might be the spoke from my architect to my parents to my family, and also very close advisory board which consists of a lot of very important artists. I remember the projector we use even today is donated by 5 artists from Mumbai, because Shilpa Gupta visited Shanthiroad and she said, I want to do something for Shanthiroad. So I said, get us a projector, and there it was, because 5 of them got together and chipped in and got us a projector or a sound system or something like. So we also get these donations. Now we have a rule that we cannot take cash donations, and everything has to be by check. And we had to work around it. So when we went to the income tax department to ask for an ATG certificate, which is a magical thing in India, I did not know what it was till I was sitting with my accountant and breaking my head, which means 3 years of documentation of how much is spent on coffee, tiffin, blah, 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 lights, whatever. And you go to the income tax department and give in your papers and fill in many forms, and they call you for an interview to ask you what is your organization about and why should we give you ATG, which means that you get a tax rebate of 50% of all the donations that come to you. So we go there, and the first thing that guy said is that as artists you're making tons of money, artists selling for lakhs of rupees, we can't give you ATG. I said, I'm not representing Hussain or Atul Dodia. So I told him that these are impoverished artists who are, are going to starve tomorrow. So he didn't take what I was trying to say until I had to strike off something that no work of art will be bought or sold by the trust. So this had to be added into the trust deed. So our trustees is very famous. Whoever wants to open an organization, we just mail it to them. It's on our in my mail. So this clause had to be introduced saying that no work of art can be bought or sold. If it is bought or sold, you don't get an ATG, because they think that you're making millions, stacks of money under my bed. I only wish, but it doesn't happen. No, but sometimes it's this idea that because art is very elitist, people think that organizations like this make a lot of money. We don't make money. It's very difficult. I don't get a salary because I'm the founding trustee. I get, I think, every time I have to submit my petrol bills to the accountant and I get a reimbursement. Other than that, nothing. I'm happy with that, because if I get a salary, I have to do a lot of other things also. But there are groups of people, collaborators, coordinators who help. We have to pay them small amounts of, sometimes we don't pay them salaries for 3 months, and then we have to give them at one shot. So it's like running a joint family, but the family members keep changing, But the success of the residency program is that there have almost been 10 artists who come back for the second time, because they love us so much. Because they've said that we've not been in another place like Shanthiroad. Obviously each place is unique, but they believe that they have a relationship with us and they feel at home in Shanthiroad because of the circle of friends I have who become their friends. I think the important thing we do for many artists who come to Bangalore is that we provide them a social space. We network them with people, like human beings that are doing things. And this is very important for an outsider who comes into the city and who will know the city during this kind of walks which I do. And trying to know the underbelly of a city or its geography and the kind of history, etc. Otherwise, it just becomes a space like any other place where you go, you finish your work. Maybe it's a studio. The problem with most residencies are it is an extension of your studio in another city. So what is different? So I tell artists to work with local material, local inspiration. You could do that at home, right? You could do what you're continuing to do in your own home, in your own studio. But can there be a rupture because there is a different cultural geography? There has to be it. So we always encourage people to work with local conditions, local craftspeople. So we have artists working with Channapata toy makers, doing installations out of them. This is what a newspaper report says, and it is going to be true. The amount of people think, this is how the real estate mind works, which I don't know of. There are a lot of flats in Bangalore which are not occupied. So that you can have 1,000 residencies in Bangalore. But obviously the real estate agents are not give you this space free. The thing is that people have a second home in Bangalore. So there's a whole racket of builders, politicians, the builders and politicians nexus. Occupy land cheaply, build spaces, problem of water, electricity.
What is your first show? What was your first show?
I'm just thinking, I think first it started off with nothing, with this vacuous space, and we were wondering what to do. So Koj was shifting from Delhi to other places. So all the meetings happened in Shanthiroad because it was a space that was available for artists. And for artists, space is like spiritual real estate, like you always want to occupy certain space because very few free spaces in the city. So the first thing was to envision an alternative art camp in Mysore and Bangalore. That was the first thing that happened. And nothing happened for initially. People were using it to do their work, etc. So we didn't even have a proper residency program. Residency program started 3 years after 2003. In 2005, the residency program started. So the first few years, it was ad hoc things like artists coming and having a one evening show because the work is going to be sent to Mumbai. So it's a preview. It's very informal. Works are not even hung, they're just stacked on the wall and everybody gangs up there. So local artists use it, whether it's Sureka, me or Prabha or many others. If I remember, there's an artist, Umesh Madanahalli, he started using the space to create a kind of interactive show in the city. The problem with this show, with this space, is what happens after I die, which might be tomorrow or today when I'm crossing the Baikula flyover, like we do not have, I know it's a joke, but this is the reality of these kind of spaces, because we do not have a second in command, or we do not groom people to take over. Because nobody wants to be the donkey. Everybody is happy to see me as the donkey. So these are because spaces are always connected with personalities. And you know of these places. There is a Ranga Shankara in Bangalore, which is a theatre space run by Arundhati Nag. There is there's also Koj in Delhi run by Pooja Sood. There was Chandralekha's space in Chennai, which was called Spaces. And it's just surviving as a space. Just to keep it going as a space is very difficult with the same kind of enthusiasm and of the founder. So the founder bears the brunt of these kind of fluctuations that happen. But there's also a clause which we say that in case things don't work, we might have to pack up. So which means that the space is going to be used by somebody else. The space remains, but the projects can change. So every 10 years you have this, we're planning to have this review meeting where all our problems are going to be heard by suggestions, and everybody will say, go ahead, do it. But when you have to do the work, you will be the single person cleaning the cobwebs and painting and removing all the leftovers after a party. So this is the problem of these spaces. It has a life of its own. So we always feel that there are ups and downs in an institution. So institutions also have a biological life. So they have a high and a low, and they also die and disappear. And we have to be open to it. It's because the idea of Shanthiroad and the space is in flux, so it has to constantly change. So tomorrow it might become boutique hotel. So all of you are welcome. Thank you.